All right. Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation Webinar. I'm Matt Helmers with Iowa State University and Director of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center, and feel fortunate to be able to moderate the webinar today. Really interesting and important topic. One, I think that many of us in Extension that work in the drainage area get lots of questions about trees and tiles. So we're going to hear from Dr. Billy Beck today. Dr. Beck is an assistant professor in the NREM department here at Iowa State University and the Extension Forestry specialist. I think Cesar Martinez is not able to join us today due to a class issue, but we have Dr. Beck with us, and he's going to talk about trees and tiles, 4 years of nitrate removal and root intrusion monitoring in a saturated riparian forest buffer. As always, if you have questions, please type those into the chat box, and we'll get those to Dr. Beck at the end of his talk. With that, Billy, the virtual floor is all yours.
Well, thanks, Matt. And thank you all for attending, and huge thanks to Iowa Learning Farms for having me here and for this opportunity and all the great things that you do. And yes, Caesar has been instrumental in this. He had a conflict today, but he is with us here in spirit. I want to start off with this. I usually start off with this in many of my talks, but a foundation of my extension and research programs is simply this. Trees are critical for the farm enterprise in Iowa. They add value to the farm enterprise. They add value to the landscape, the agricultural landscape. This is a cool quote from a rotational grazing operation in Polk County, critical for their economic goals and their overall goals for the land. And I love this aerial shot. It just shows the range of forestry practices that can be implemented on farm to not only boost economics, but also, again, aid that landscape and the ecosystem goods and services that trees and forests provide. And the one thing I love about this is the small landscape footprint that these practices take up. So today, again, I'm always trying to incorporate trees, forests, and forestry into the agricultural enterprise and the agricultural landscape. And again, thanks to Iowa Learning Farms, I was very fortunate to incorporate windbreaks, bottomland timber, and of course, riparian forest buffers into the recent revision of the Conservation Best Practices Manual. So today, we're going to talk about an interesting little project just south of campus here, a saturated riparian forest buffer. So real quick plan for today, some quick background and objectives. Then I want to hit a little bit on tree root physiology and growth. Before you hit the exit button, it is fascinating, I promise. So we'll just touch the tip of the iceberg there, but I want to hit some things about that before we dive into the methods. Then the preliminary results. We kind of just wrapped up our year 4 monitoring. So these are some really preliminary results, but kind of want to show you some trends that are going on in this practice. And then some preliminary conclusions and maybe discuss some future work during the Q&A session. And I got to hand it to countless undergrads that have helped out with this project. I'll shout them out by name if I remember. This is Jesse Mott, now a soil con with NRCS in Northeast Iowa, but big help in 2021 when we were planting this thing. So I'm going to assume, I hate assuming, but I'm going to assume that many of our audience today is familiar with saturated buffers, but I'll give you a really quick rundown of them. So the intent of these is to divert tile drainage laterally, raise that riparian groundwater table, and allow that water to then slowly move to the channel through groundwater flow. Again, we're raising that water table up into the high carbon, high organic matter soils in the top of the profile, which is conducive to nitrogen removal, functions such as denitrification and others, and vegetative uptake. So instead of short circuiting, going right to the creek, we raise that table and pass it through groundwater to the channel. However, I was always curious, and I think a lot of us foresters were always curious as we go around the landscape, can we incorporate woody vegetation into this practice? For a variety of reasons. A, to see if it has any differences in end removal versus the vast majority of practices that are non-woody vegetation established. And then also, we do know that trees add value to the farm and also compound benefits like ecosystem goods and services to the landscape. So can we do two things at once? Can we get some N removal from tile drainage? And can we add a unique structure, unique species composition, diversity to the ag landscape with trees? So 4 main objectives that I'll hit today. Obviously, objective 1 is establishing this thing. And our intent was to use this as not only a research site, but as an extension and a teaching site as well. And we've nailed all 3 of those so far since 2021, where we implemented this. I'll do a shameless plug here for our 2022 Iowa Learning Farms virtual field day on site here. That's my shameless plug for the day, one of them. But we've held classes out here. We've held small conference tours out here. We've held virtual field days out here. And of course, we've done some research out here. So I'm really glad that objective 1 is going along nicely there. Second is to monitor for N removal. And I'll get to this in the methods, but due to budgets, we are just looking at N concentration. So we're not calculating load at present. So this is just N concentration. And then finally, actually, not finally, number 3 is to quantify in-tile root intrusion. I really think that that is one of the main reasons folks shy away from this practice. There's a stigma with trees and tile and roots and blocking them up. There's a lot of stigmas with trees in the Midwest, but that's one of them. I think that's one of the big reasons that folks shy away from even considering including trees in a practice such as this that has tile drainage. And then finally, we'd like to quantify value and compound benefits. So we're tracking a number of things like cost, people hours to install and maintain, and also compound benefits like pollinator use, bird use, tree height and diameter growth for future forest and non-timber forest products. So tracking, how this could benefit the landowner and also how this could benefit the landscape in general, besides water quality. Okay. Oh boy, here we go. Sorry for the sip there. But I just want to hit tree physiology or tree root physiology and growth real quick. This is kind of a crash course. Some things to keep in mind as we talk about tree roots and tiles. First off, where is the biomass in forests? It's a little bit flipped. It's not a little bit. It's a lot flipped from, say, a prairie or a native grass situation. Most of the biomass in forested situations is above ground. So it's about a 5 or 6 to 1 ratio of mass above ground to below ground as far as biomass. So a little bit flipped from our prairie friends there. And tree roots have 2 main types of roots. There's coarse roots, which you can see here on the right, the yellow arrows. So those are used for stability, storage, things like that, holding the tree in place, storing things like energy, carbohydrates, things like that. And then we have fine roots, which is kind of the zoomed in panel there at the top of the screen. And these are the fine roots with a rapid turnover that take up water and the nutrients and oxygen dissolved in that water. These are very ephemeral, very vulnerable in the environment. But these are the things that take up the goodies, the water, the nutrients dissolved in water, oxygen, things like that. So biomass above ground, coarse roots, fine roots. So where do tree roots grow? This is a big thing I see every time I see somebody's shirt that has an artist's rendition in figure A here on the left with the X, and nothing against artists, but that is not how tree roots grow in general. They don't have this wide expanding fan that goes down and wide at equal proportions. How they do grow is the photo or the image of figure A on the right. Most of the roots, especially the fine roots, most of the roots are in the upper 1 meter of the soil profile. And why is that? That's where most of the soil porosity is, water holding capacity, oxygen holding capacity, things like that. So figure B is kind of a fun example of that. Not very fun for that tree, but fun for me. This massive tree you can see here, most of those roots are not going very deep. They're in that upper 1 meter or so of the soil profile. So tree roots go out and they don't go down very deep in general. Now, there's certain situations where sandy soils and whatnot that could drive the roots deeper, but in general, tree roots look like figure A on the right there. And honestly, in forested situations, the roots can go out laterally 2, almost 3 times the mature height of that tree. So if you look at figure C here, this is a neat kind of drawing from back in the 60s, very, very popular drawing in forestry textbooks. This is a maple root, a lateral root that is going out, and the black dots you see are other maples in that forest stand. So kind of opposed to above ground competition where canopies really don't touch, they really don't mingle very much. The root system below ground definitely mingles. They get out, they interact, they intersect, they take up the same matrix there. So a little bit different from above ground shoots as these below ground roots are. And then lastly, real quick, just timing. When do tree roots grow? And this is important for competition and weed control, which we won't really get in here today. But they have a burst of growth in the spring and early summer. It tones down a bit, and then they have a second burst of growth in the fall up to the time that the ground freezes. So I always encourage folks to water their trees even in the fall to get them ready for winter. All right. So with this practice, we really need to consider flood tolerance. So when I say flood tolerance of trees, it's essentially the period of time that a species can tolerate a saturated root zone. So pore spaces are full of water, oxygen is getting depleted. And of course, this can be affected by soil pore space, compaction, things like that. So flood tolerance. For flood tolerance, there's kind of a gradient or a grouping of species here that go from very tolerant of flooding all the way down to very intolerant of flooding. And what that means in general is trees that are very tolerant of flooding can maintain and almost expand their root systems during those saturated conditions. The middle of the road species can sustain their root matrix during those conditions, but not really expand. And then the intolerant species simply die in those saturated conditions. So they can't maintain and they can't sustain. So this is a very important concept we had to take in consideration when we were designing this practice. And I'll get to that in a sec. Here's some lovely silver maples being saturated along the Des Moines River many, many years ago. All right. So objective 1, I'll be quick here. This was a big process, a very cool learning experience for me as a forester on how to site a saturated buffer. But objective 1, establishing this thing. Big thanks to the West Dairy Farm, ISU Farms in Story County. This was former row crop ground that we were able to find, working with them, a spot for this with appropriate soils and all the different siting factors that go along with siting saturated riparian buffers. I won't go into that today just for time, but in general, a loam, mix of loam, clay loam soils in this little spot we picked out. A little bit higher soil pH than we'd like for a lot of our native tree species, or a lot of our bottom native species, but we address that. This was a 10-inch tile, draining about 18 acres of total drainage area. And this practice is a little flipped. We found a lot of sites, but none of them were quite right, and none of them would quite work except for this one. So by flipped, I mean this is not directly adjacent to the stream here. The stream, I say, it's an ag ditch, a drainage ditch. You can see Everett there on the top right in this thing, sinuosity of 1.0 there, but so it's flipped. And the reason we did not go up to the edge is because that immediate riparian buffer there was in a CRP contract in 2021 when we wanted to install this, and we didn't want to wait a few years for that to expire and then establish it then. We wanted to get this on the ground and running. So it's a little bit flipped. So it's back. It's not immediately adjacent to the stream. So something we're going to have to consider, especially with hydraulics and things as we move forward. So April 2021, we installed this. There's Ted Lambie with Lambie Excavating there. This was the coolest thing. One of the coolest things I've seen is this thing going in. The Tyler there. I've got a schematic coming up, but it's 875 feet total in lateral length. That's when we ran out of the appropriate slope that would work for this thing. We were able to go 875 feet, 30-inch lateral depth, and every 145 feet, we added a clean out. And you can see Everett up there at the top. It's basically a pipe that tees and comes up to the top. That's where we're going to put our scope in and monitor for root intrusion. So all of the plots that we established had one of those clean outs in it. And this is a 2-chamber box. I said before we're not calculating flow and thus load. For the budget for this project, we were only able to get a 2-chamber box. So we're looking at essentially concentration reductions for this project. So here it is. Here's my little cartoon schematic here of the final buffer implementation here. It's about 3.3 acres in size. 1 acre of that is actually the saturated zone. We wanted to kind of go out and have a buffer actually around that saturated zone, again, for extension and teaching purposes. And we asked the farms, how many acres can we possibly get in trees here? And that was the limit there. So again, you see the green on the western side of the buffer, we tapered it for machinery ease of going around this thing. And then we had a little gap by the road there so machinery could access the field. But again, the saturated zone itself is 50 feet wide and 871 feet long, which comes out to about 1 acre. So we've got about 4, I'll get to this in a second. We've got about 4 rows of trees in the saturated zone and 11 rows of trees and a mixture of native shrubs in the non-saturated zone, which could lead to some neat numbers in the future about which trees are performing better, saturated zone trees or the non-saturated zone trees. So here's a quick schematic of the setup for sampling. So you got the field tile coming in from the top. Oh, student shout out. That is Jen Merriman, now assistant teaching professor in Iowa State University, NREM. And wow, I love you. I'm blanking on your name. Logan. Oh my gosh, he's out in Colorado right now. Sorry, Logan. Logan Hammond. So flow coming down, control box diverts the lateral 875 feet. With that, we were able to get 6 treatment plots of 145 foot width each. So a treatment plot, that blue rectangle there, we've got 3 species that we selected for the project, 2 reps of each. So again, we wanted a wide enough plot for this, but we were only able to get 2 reps of these with the 870 plus foot lateral length there. So each plot is 145 foot wide and 50 foot long from tile to the end. And within each plot, we've got 2 groundwater monitoring wells, one at 25 foot approximately, and the other at 50 foot. And again, you can see the cleanouts kind of mark the boundaries of each one of these plots. So we'll shove our probe in there and scope the entire 145 foot and then pull back out. So 3 species, 2 reps each, 4 rows of trees spaced 10 foot apart. Within the rows, we space the trees 6 foot apart. Comes out to about 700 trees per acre. And you can see here we've got a western batch and an eastern batch. All right, so the big question after we got all this laid out and installed and kind of ready to go is, what tree species do we want to look at? And we decided on these 3 groups. There's 4 species total. American sycamore, A right there with me. Swamp white oak, really cool tree, which keeps its leaves over the winter. And then a combination of hickories, shellbark hickory and northern pecan. And C, that's Tanner, another student. That's Sabrina, another former student. And that's Lisa Lauk, Iowa DNR District Forester. There's Emma Kearns, now Extension Forester in Northeast Iowa. But why did we pick these 3? This was not an easy task to find 3 that would work on this site. Four main things we wanted to consider. We wanted the species to be not somewhat, but native species. We wanted them to match the site soils. So they'll need to be able to grow in a bottomland situation. And especially the big thing that was limiting was the pH. We had a high pH, about 7 to 8 pH here in the soils. A lot of bottomland trees do not like that type of pH. They get chlorotic. So we searched, these four fit the bill. They do a little bit better on higher pH soils. Second, almost equally important, is these have mid-range flood tolerance. So they like wet feet, but they don't like them so much where they could expand that root network in times of saturation. So we wanted them to be able to take saturation, but not really be an aggressive rooter in that type of situation, as opposed to things like willow. Also, these species have been predicted to do well with a northern movement with a warming climate. So that was kind of a bonus there as well. So we're going to see how they do as we bump them up a little bit in latitude from southern Iowa. And then finally, we wanted species that would add value to not only the farm as far as recreation opportunities, fuel wood, non-timber forest products, aesthetics, but also to the landscape. So wildlife, pollinators, things like that. So these four species really fit the bill to match all our criteria there. And there's others out there. It really depends on your soil type. This is not limited. This practice would not be limited to these four species by any means. We also established 6 to 7 native shrub species, which I'll hit here in a second. Not really much for they're not in the saturated zone. They're just kind of there for added wildlife value, added structural diversity, added pollinator value, and to kind of taper that future woodland edge off as we meet the crop field there. So we don't have the trees hanging over the crop field. All right, so real quick methods for objective 2, the monitoring. We're looking at nitrate N, and our samples are being analyzed by the Water Quality Research Lab in ISU ABE. We've been doing this since fall of 2021. We're just wrapping up our 2024 season here. In general, when flow is present, and that's been a challenge these last few years, we've been doing it bi-weekly from about April to November, and we take samples at the box, and then at the 25-foot well and the 50-foot well, again, going out from that lateral. And we also record depth to the water table, which I'm not going to really hit today, but it's going to be a really interesting data set when we combine that with nitrate and tree growth. So root intrusion, objective 3, we kind of laid off until 2024, just assuming that there wasn't going to be much going on with these very young bare root seedlings that we planted, 1-2 foot tall, minimal root system that we planted. We chose those because we're planting thousands of them and for budget reasons. So in October 2024, we did our initial scope assessment. So we had this, I call it a Maverick, that's probably not the right word, but USDA lent us this kind of rough, kind of low res scope cam. We went through all of the 6 plots, and we took some screenshots and just qualitative notes. The point of this was to see if anything at all was in there. Then we call in the professional drain folks with their high-res video where we could record and then quantify root intrusion using those recorded videos. And then in the future, I think we're going to have to come up with a better method of extracting some of the roots so we can see, are they woody or are they non-woody? I'll go back here. There's Caesar with his old-timey kind of camera hood over him so he can see that screen in the daylight. And then Luke Moorend, forestry student, manning the probe there. All right, last objective 4. This is a mixed bag of stuff. I'll just kind of loosely or quickly go over this. Value and compound benefits. We've been looking at seedling mortality, again, tracking costs and tracking, tips for a landowner in installing these things since 21. We're now that the seedlings are kind of up and running, we're looking at seedling height and diameter. We've been doing bird use surveys since 2024, this year. We've been doing pollinator surveys, and I'll get to that in a second, since 2024. And then, of course, we're taking pretty detailed records on the cost, the time, the people power involved with maintaining these trees and inputs and things like that. All right, real quick. Again, these are preliminary results. Just kind of showing some really general quick trends here. So this is overall buffer performance. So disregarding treatments, just looking at the young buffer in general. And again, this is mean NO3N concentration, all the treatments combined. Over the 4 years, we've got an average concentration of 14.5 milligrams per liter nitrate N at the box. And then at the 25-foot mark in the wells, we're down to 12.9. And then finally at the 50-foot, on average, we're down to about 4.9 milligrams per liter. So it's reducing nitrate concentration as a very young forest buffer. So the treatment performance, this is busted out by treatment, but taking all the data put together from November 21 to July 24. We've got sycamore, SYC, swamp white oak, SWO, and HCK is the shellbark, and pecan, the hickories. Sycamore, again, going from top to bottom, lateral to practice edge. 14.5 was the box. Well was 11.6 at 25, and then well at 50 was 8.4. I won't read all these off, but you can kind of see there's a little bit difference in species. Again, these are very young trees. I'm not sure if we're able to really, tease out some trends here. There's a lot of, soil heterogeneity out there, concentrated flow paths, things like that. But there is a little bit of a trend here as far as species go, to the tune of reducing nitrate N concentration at the 50-foot mark. Swamp white oak is 84%, hickories 72%, and then sycamore 42%. The root intrusion, so objective 3. So we did these in October, and this was really exciting to us getting out there and scoping these things for the first time. We really didn't notice any visual differences between the treatments, which was a bit of a shock to us considering the differences in growth of between the 3 species. The vast majority of the roots that we did observe, you can see the common screenshot here on the left of your screen, were these non-woody kind of shoelace looking roots. Those were the most common that we encountered. And we actually were able, by accident, to kind of extract these as we removed that probe. And they were hollow. They were definitely non-woody. We did take kind of a Forbes survey out there, a really, really cursory one. But they were definitely not woody. Rarely, very rarely, we did bump into some small patches of what we would consider more woody root looking. Again, we weren't able to extract this and confirm, but on the right there, the rare, to me, looks more woody root than what we see, what we mostly saw scoping these things. So really not much going on down there at present. So getting into some of the value, some of the tree species growth and mortality. Sycamores, fast-growing tree, really took off. This is Caesar and Luke right here. They're averaging at the end of year 4. Again, these started out as about 1 to 2 foot seedlings in 2021. They're averaging about 8.8 feet tall, which is pretty amazing after only 4 growing seasons. Swamp white oak, a little more slower growing, 3.7. And then hickories, notoriously slow growing species, especially right off the bat, 2.2 feet tall. So we have to be really careful out there when we're mowing. Seedling mortality, I've been very thrilled with the low mortality rates that we've seen here. And that's thanks to the ISU farm staff that I'll credit here in a second. But sycamore, rockin', very little mortality. Swamp white oak, still very, very good mortality. And then hickory, still even very good mortality, but was the highest at 7%. So annually, we do a survey and we replace these species as needed. This is cool. I thank Dr. Catherine Crowell-O'Brien, ISU NREM, for this. Just did a quick pollinator survey this summer, and we're going to continue this seasonally as we go forward here. Pollinator presence. They detected honeybees, hoverflies, and butterflies, and you can see the list of cool butterflies there that were present in the buffer. And then plant-pollinator interactions, which I take as the actual pollinator physically interacting with the plant. They only found that happening with Canada thistle, which was the most abundant forb. which is common in young tree plantings. We didn't think it was that much of an issue to really control it. And honestly, with our maintenance plan, we left a lot of broadleaves within the rows of these tree planting rows, which adds a little bit of deer and herbivory protection. It adds a little bit of protection against desiccation from summer and winter winds. So we weren't too concerned about broadleaves within our tree planting rows. The big concern we did have, and we try to control as best we could, was cool season grass, which if you look back at that root growth chart of timing of the year, root growths of tree roots grow at the same time as cool season grass roots, making them very competitive. But I want to add this. We added thousands of shrubs along the perimeter of this planting that have yet to bloom. They're only a few years old. They probably should start blooming in the next few years. Things like black chokeberry, nannyberry, wild plum, serviceberry, gray dogwood, and chokecherry. So I think this is going to get really interesting as we move forward there. So just real quick preliminary conclusions. This young buffer, is effective at reducing NO3N concentrations. Again, we didn't look at load for budget reasons. But the young age of these trees may confound trends in species performance. This is going to be really interesting as these trees age and expand their root systems and honestly start taking up more of this potentially taking up more nitrate. It'll be interesting to see how these the data turn out there. And shockingly to us, especially due to the size of the sycamores, was that minimal roots were observed in the tiles at year 4. So that was very interesting to us. And the compound benefits are emerging. We're seeing, just even when we're out there, we're seeing a lot of wildlife. We're seeing a lot of songbirds that we're not seeing as we're walking through crop fields and things like that. So tons of people to thank. The Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture. They funded this project initially, and they funded it again to do some new to continue the effort and do a few more new things like the bird surveys. Doctors Tom Eisenhart, Tyler Groh of Penn State, and Morgan Davis at the University of Missouri help advise me on kind of designing this and getting this on the ground. Kent Hykins, formerly with ARS, now with ISU, and of course the ISU farm staff for finding me some spots and eventually letting me pick a spot, especially Troy Heron, ag specialist on the right, forester by training. Instrumental. We couldn't have done this without him. Maintenance, design, really getting these trees. That's why the mortality is so low. Honestly, it's because of Troy. Countless undergrads to thank. But Caesar Martinez, Luke Morand, Everett Johnson, and Angel Brown were really integral for this. ISU or IDNR district foresters for giving me chatting about recommendations on trees, and of course Iowa Learning Farms, and y'all for spending your lunch hour with us. So with that's kind of a quick update of where we're at, and looking forward to moving on with this project. So if anybody wants to see it, it's right south of campus. So just let me know. So.
All right. Thanks, Billy. I think we're getting lots of questions. Let's go to I'll get through the logistical slides as quick as I can if you want to go forward. If you watch this webinar live and would like to earn a CCA CEU, send your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number to Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. Again, your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number to Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. If you watch this webinar live and are willing to fill out a voluntary demographic survey, we'd greatly appreciate it. Only one survey response is needed for all 2024 webinars. You can scan that QR code or go to iowalearningfarms.org/survey. And next slide. I think next week, there is no webinar. So check out one of our archives. Take that time to go find one of interest. And we're still working on the webinar for December 4th, but we will be back on no matter what on December 4th. Be on the lookout for that. And I think just a plug maybe on the next slide for the webinars are archived at the iowalearningfarms.org website. Also, we have an Iowa Learning Farms webinars YouTube channel, so you can get that on your playlist and get notified when things are updated. Okay, we did have we've gotten a lot of questions here. So I guess one quick one, what was the depth of the tile in this study?
The depth of the tile in this study was 30 inches.
Okay,
And for the first 4 years, I should have mentioned this, we set the stop log to saturate within 1 foot of the surface. Now with these trees, as they get larger, we're going to have to consider dropping that to allow for a little bit of root expansion and growth. We don't want all the roots in the upper 1 foot.
okay,
So
yeah. Maybe you can go back 2 slides with that where that QR code is. Oh, I had right there. Just leave it there for a second. Somebody wanted that QR code. Okay, let's move up here. Is there any interest in expanding the work by your former lab members on N2O fluxes from the edge of field or these streamside practices?
there is.
Okay.
I wonder if that's one of my former lab members
Yeah,
asking that.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. I thought. Okay. Does the drought drive the roots deeper looking for water?
So yes, and honestly, that was one of the concerns we had. Is that it's complicated, but if the water table in that buffer drops significantly, there may be the only source of moisture in that area may be that tile.
Okay.
And they could seek that out potentially. So that's going to be really neat to track water table depth with our now more rigorous scoping and quantification of in-tile root intrusion.
So in some ways, the last few, I guess it's been pretty shallow rooted to this, early in the tree species, but the last few years have been pretty dry. That they might have been trying to get to that, but unfortunately they weren't. Yeah, they were probably just establishing some of their root system.
That's what I'm thinking. They're just so young. I'd love to go take some cores and see quantify roots at depth.
Yeah.
I think that might be the next proposal. That's a good chunk of work. That might even be a grad student effort there, quantifying roots by depth. So that would be really cool.
Okay. Did you change the water level through the year with the stop logs?
No, we didn't. And honestly, with the drought, I don't think we really needed to. So,
okay.
But we did not. Going forward, I think we're gonna have to discuss and decide on dropping those stop logs as the trees get more mature. So,
okay. I guess there was. Did you test the roots to see if there was any difference in species seeking tile?
no, we kind of accidentally. This thing was not designed to. That probe was not designed to extract roots. We accidentally caught some, but you should have seen the three of us out there when we were able to pull some roots out. We all flipped out, but they were not woody. They were hollow. We took a quick kind of cursory survey of what was in the immediate area that was non-woody. I've got it in the back of my head. I think it was some asters and like Canada thistle and things like that. But no, we're gonna have to see how we can extract and look and confirm woody or non-woody. So
okay. Can you, I guess, describe a little more about what steps you took kind of to assist with survivability of the young trees?
yeah, honestly, may I go forward here? I've got some
Yeah. I think we're
slides.
probably good. Yep. Oh, you got it. Yeah, you're prepared. Okay.
Hey, this is from Troy Heron. This is the maintenance that he's kind of prescribed and is undertaken out there. And honestly, if it wasn't for him, these things would have been toast, I think, in the drought. Just the way he controlled competing vegetation and things like that. So in the seedling rows, I won't read this, but I'll give you the main points here. Site prep was critical, is critical in tree plantings. However, we were starting from a bare crop field. So he basically we smoothed out and leveled the soil after the tile work. I think he did put down some pre-emergent herbicide within the tree planting rows. So we really targeted the tree planting rows for herbicide, for grass herbicide, grass vegetation control. The 10-foot spaces between the tree planting rows, we just mowed. So we mowed before they went to seed. So just keep mowing them, mowing them, mowing them. And if you look back at that photo with Caesar and Luke, eventually those trees are going to close their canopy and kind of take care of the weed control for us. But we mow the tree rows every 3 to 6 weeks to keep the weeds short in the treetops. That's for visual, so we can actually see where the tree rows are too. And then herbicide, we do one in the spring and one in the fall as a side dress along the tree row. So Troy's got this, I'm not kidding, it's a lawnmower with this really ingenious herbicide applicator on it that really, it's a side dress. We hit that tree planting row with herbicide, and he's got the rates here. But it's spring and fall, so when the leaves are yet to emerge, and in fall, when they're dormant, he goes in and hits that for the control there. So, and I can share this if y'all want, or take a photo of it. But the point of this is there's a lot of tactics for this, but 3 to 5 years of maintenance is essential for tree plantings, vegetation control, especially cool season grass.
Okay. There's a farm program question. Is the annual CRP payment for riparian forest buffers or riparian buffers higher with trees in the buffer?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I could ask. Yep.
Okay.
We do have a brand new, or fairly brand new, NRCS state forester that was recently hired, which is cool news. So I can inquire to her about that. So
okay. I think this one's, do you have nitrate concentrations for a no tree kind of no tree saturated buffer or control?
So for that, I didn't present those today, but for that, we're using there's a practice just upstream under Dr. Tom Eisenhart and some others that is a native grass saturated buffer.
Okay.
So we're going to use that for the comparison there.
For comparison, yeah. And do you know at that site if they have an area of control with just cropland? Because I think they've done that in a couple other areas, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know, but
okay.
we kind of figured we'll seek out those around the Ames area and maybe use those as a control. So
okay. Kind of a practical one. If you were looking a project like this in Northwest Iowa, any suggestions on tree species? I know it probably depends because they indicated swamp white oak and hickory pecan aren't recommended in Northwest Iowa.
Yeah. I would say swamp white oak more than the other two, more than the hickories, and potentially sycamore as well. Again, these were predicted to be suitable for a warming climate as you move 100 to 200 miles north of where they currently exist. Other hardy species might be bur oak. It does okay on higher pH soils, and it's pretty adaptable. It can tolerate wet feet at some point. Another one that I'd like to look into, and please don't throw anything at me, is potentially honey locust. Honey locust can tolerate a little bit of wet feet, and it's very hardy, a hardy species there. I think it really comes down to, and again, honestly, that's going to be challenging now that you got me thinking about that, because tree diversity really drops off as we move from the southeast part of the state to the northeast part of the state. So I'd have to think about that one for a bit. But a good resource locally would be your Iowa DNR district forester, and there's a lot of great pubs out there about matching species to site conditions. Okay. The main thing I'm concerned about in bottomlands, or I'm sorry, in this neck of the woods was the higher soil pH.
All right. Do you anticipate any effects from the tannins on the efficiency of nitrate removal?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're looking at that right now in bioreactors from wood, not from living growing trees. But tannin-wise, honestly, the swamp white oak may have a little bit higher tannin content. But honestly, the content is concentrated in the bark and the leaves, and I just don't see a massive litter layer building up in this project, or this practice site, just from the winds and whatnot. So like if you go up north, you see a lot of high tannin content in the streams and rivers up there. By up north, I mean like Minnesota and
Yeah.
Wisconsin. But honestly, that's a great question. We're actually getting set up on campus to look at tannins in wood, and perhaps we should start sending a few samples over there to look at those. So
Okay. Great. By chance, you don't have a picture of Troy's side dress sprayer, do you?
I have one.
Okay.
Not on the
Okay.
presentation. And actually, honestly, this is my second shameless plug.
Okay.
Um, we have a quick YouTube series called this is such a plug, I'm sorry. The Iowa Woodland Steward Toolkit, which is 31
Okay.
videos. They're short, they're under 3 to 5 minutes. In the site prep video and a number of the herbicide videos, you can see Troy's setup in action.
Okay.
So I could also, if you want, I don't know how I'd get that to you, but it's
Well,
really
you can
cool.
send,
So
yeah, you can send it to me. Oh, Elena, I think Elena's just found it. So, all right, this is where, like having somebody else on that could do that while I'm going through the questions. So hopefully that might be it. This is a good one because actually I wondered it too. Can you apply glyphosate to tree bark when dormant?
yes, and that's what
Okay,
Troy's been doing.
been doing. Okay,
Yep.
yeah, okay. Um, they're kind of a, let me see here. Um, Somebody was wondering if you could speculate on how the ET from the trees might impact load reduction relative to a non-woody um, saturated buffer.
Yeah, I think they're going to be pulling a lot of water from the upper portion of that soil profile. As far as load, I think they're going to be taking up a significant amount of water and dissolved in as they evapotranspire rate. So because of the nature of their being high in the soil profile, I think that could be an advantage perhaps,
Yeah.
maybe over the non-woodies. Um, Another thing I would like to consider in the future is, carbon additions to the soil, which perhaps the non-woodies would have a leg up on the forest. So
Okay. Um, was there any concern with the cropland bordering on the other side with water availability from the trees?
oh, interesting. Um, I mean, that's a concern that folks have. The ISU Farms was not too concerned about it. And honestly, the more we look at windbreaks, this technically is a windbreak. There could be a drawdown immediately adjacent to the field, but there could be a boost beyond that.
Okay.
So they didn't bring it up, but I know it's a definite concern. And the border was shrubs.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
these are not, you know, 50-year oak roots going out, 50 feet plus. These are smaller shrubs. So I'd predict a smaller drawdown, but I'd be interested to see if there's a yield bump from that windbreak being there from southern desiccating winds. So
Can you expand on how you decided on how, kind of the density of the tree planting and if there are any plans to look at some other density?
yeah, let me go back here a bit. So this is a standard. It kind of fell in line with NRCS specs. That's kind of how we designed the spacing of the rows and the spacing within the rows. So we wanted to try to get as close as we could to NRCS specs for the CP22S, which is a cost shareable practice. So 10 foot between the rows and 6 foot within the rows. That's 700 trees per acre. That's a common planting design for tree plantings. The 10 foot between the rows, another reason we did that was so Troy could get his mower down there for the first 5 years. So we spaced it that way so we could
Okay.
maintain those tree planting rows. Um, I should have mentioned this too, and I had it in my schematic. We backed off 20 feet from the lateral with the first tree planting
Okay.
row. And we did this, A, for maintenance, but two, if we ever needed to get in there for whatever reason and get a larger vehicle or something in there to either address any kind of in-tail rooting or maybe even address it with a root pruning or a ripping to kind of sever those roots if they're getting to that point. But there's a range of spacings you could do. We packed them pretty tight. I wouldn't say super tight, but pretty tight because we wanted them to kind of grow up rapidly upward and not quick, not expand out laterally right off the bat. So NRCS specs, equipment, access were kind of the drivers of spacing. But you can space as needed. Just a rule of thumb, the tighter you pack them, they're going to put on primary growth first. So we're going to get really, really tall. And then after that, you would need to thin them out so they can get wider then. If you space them far apart, they're going to put a lot more lateral growth on than height. So,
Okay. What type of planter was used in planting the trees?
oh, I don't know the specific type, but it was a tree planting machine.
Okay.
You can see here on the right. So what this thing does, this isn't the best angle to see how it operates, but it's got a large disc in the front and a shoe that you adjust the depth to meet the root depth of your stock, and it creates a furrow. Then Everett there, Emma is going to hand Everett a seedling, and he's going to throw that seedling down in a little slot in that furrow, and then behind Everett is a compaction wheel that closes that furrow up. And there's actually a little ingenious dinger on the back of this thing that you can set to a distance, and we set it as 6 foot. So every time it dinged, we'd put a seedling down. You can rent these commonly from like county conservation offices, things like that. This is good for, large open areas where you're planting thousands of seedlings. This wouldn't be good for like a woodland area or maybe a smaller planting where hand planting might be advised.
Okay.
So,
okay. What do the root systems of the shrubs look like?
So they're not as deep and they're more kind of full and robust, I would say. Let me see. I got that photo of Jesse. So those I believe are shrubs. And you can see they're very fibrous. They don't have a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but they have more, I'd say, fine roots than coarse roots versus the bare root tree seedlings right out of the bat, right out of the gates there. So another advantage of that tree planting machine is those roots that come out of the nurseries these days are very full root systems. Like, for a bare root seedling, that's really great. And you don't want to lop off a lot of those. You want to maintain a nice root to shoot ratio. Point of that is, if you don't have an implement to go down that deep, it's better to use a large machine that can get down deep versus chopping a lot of those roots off and planting them with a shovel. So that's one of the first things I do when I get seedlings in the mail is I see how extensive the root systems are, both wide and deep. And then I say, okay, is that shovel depth? Is it planting bar depth? Is it tree planting machine depth? And if it's larger than my implement, I'm going to carefully trim off enough roots to make them lay nicely and fall into the hole and not have them coming up or circling around. So again, also without trimming off a ton of those roots. So.
All right, Billy. I want to thank you. I think we'll call it there in the interest of time, but I think that this kind of brings up something we might do in the future is every once in a while maybe just having a topic with a couple people, not having a presentation, but we can discuss things and answer questions. And I think something on trees sounds really one that we should do because there are every time we do something on trees, there's a lot of interest and a lot of questions, which is great because it shows that there's a need. There is one last one that I think could be useful to address. Do you anticipate an issue with weed trees establishing over time that have better tolerance for saturated conditions?
I would say right off the bat, maybe when it's very open and there's abundant sunlight. A lot of our weed trees need intense sunlight right off the bat because they're often wind dispersed and they have a small seed that doesn't have a lot of energy in it, like cottonwood, willow, things like that. Once we've got a rigid maintenance kind of regimen here. But I think when the canopies close, it's going to discourage those types of trees, those early colonizers, from coming in.
Okay. All right. Billy, thank you so much. Always appreciate your enthusiasm and excitement for this. And it's really important. And again, if somebody needs a CCA CEU, email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu with your name, your CCA number, and the name you entered to watch the webinar, and get that to her by 5 o'clock today. With that, Billy, I'll give you the last word.
Well, thanks everybody for attending, and thank you, Learning Farms, for having me back.
Yeah.
That's great.
We'll take you as many times as you're willing to come.
Thank you. But I'd say just think about how and where trees can fit into your ag enterprise and into the agricultural landscape. So,
all right. Thanks everybody for attending. Please be back in 2 weeks and be on the lookout for the topic for that one. Thanks a lot.